The massive research station horizon hung like a silver needle against the dark fabric of space. Through one of its thick observation windows, Dr. James Reed watched the purple-tinted planet below with a mix of excitement and nervousness. After 3 months of space travel, he had finally arrived at his new home. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a deep voice asked behind him. James turned to see Commander Wilson, a tall man with gray hair and weather-beaten features. "Most people don't stay long enough to appreciate the view." James nodded, his reflection showing a young man with determined eyes. "I've read all the reports about Planet 2187, sir. I know what happened to the other research teams." "Then you know why they call it the Death World," Wilson said, crossing his arms. 15 researchers dead in the past 2 years, all because of those creatures. James knew exactly what Wilson meant. The Shadow Stalkers, as they were commonly known, had earned their reputation as the galaxy's deadliest predators. No other species had such a perfect hunting record against humans. Their very existence had turned Planet 2187 into a no-go zone for most scientific expeditions. "That's exactly why I'm here, sir," James said, pulling out his tablet to show his research. "I've spent my entire career studying predatory species. There's always a pattern, always a reason for their behavior. We just need to understand it." Wilson let out a short laugh. "Understand it? Dr. Reed, these aren't your Earth lions or tigers. The Shadow Stalkers hunt in complete darkness. They can tear through reinforced steel like paper. The last team's cameras caught one jumping 50 feet straight up to catch its prey." "And doesn't that fascinate you?" James asked, his eyes lighting up. "Their intelligence levels are off the charts. They use complex hunting strategies. They even seem to have some form of social structure. There has to be more to them than just killing machines." The commander's expression turned serious. "Your enthusiasm is admirable, Doctor, but it's my job to keep people alive on this station. So let me be clear about your assignment. You will observe the Shadow Stalkers only through our long-range cameras. No field visits, no close encounters, no heroics. Understood?" "Yes, sir," James replied, though his mind was already racing with possibilities. Later that day, James sat in his new lab, surrounded by screens showing different areas of the planet's surface. The Shadow Stalkers were hard to spot. Their dark, sleek bodies blended perfectly with the shadows of the planet's dense forests. But James had trained his eyes for this kind of work. There, a flash of movement caught his attention. He zoomed in one of the cameras, his heart beating faster as he glimpsed a Shadow Stalker moving through the trees. Its movements were smooth, calculated, nothing like the mindless aggression described in the reports. "They're wrong about you," he whispered to the screen. "There's something more going on here." A knock at his lab door made him jump. Dr. Lisa Green, the station's senior biologist, walked in with a stack of data cards. "Here's all our previous research on the Shadow Stalkers," she said, placing them on his desk. "Not that it'll do you much good. Most of the data comes from watching them kill our people." James picked up one of the cards. "Has anyone ever tried approaching them without weapons, without threatening them?" Lisa's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? The last person who got within 100 feet of a Shadow Stalker was torn to pieces in seconds. They're monsters, pure and simple." "No creature in nature kills without reason," James argued. "There must be something we're missing." "Well, good luck figuring it out from here," Lisa said, heading for the door. "Just remember, curiosity killed more than just the cat on this planet." After she left, James turned back to his screens. The Shadow Stalker he'd spotted earlier was still there, and now he could see it wasn't alone. 2 others had joined it, and they seemed to be playing. The creatures chased each other through the trees, showing incredible agility and coordination. "Everyone's so focused on how dangerous you are," James murmured, making notes on his tablet. "Nobody's asking why you became that way." As night fell on Planet 2187, James continued his observations, unaware that his assignment was about to become much more than just watching from a safe distance. The shadow stalkers had already noticed the new human watching them, and they were far more curious about him than anyone could have guessed. 3 weeks of watching the shadow stalkers through cameras had taught James more than all the previous research combined. He noticed patterns in their behavior. They weren't random killers. They had territories, social groups, and even seemed to have preferred hunting grounds that they defended from other packs. Time for another surface check, James muttered to himself as he prepared his equipment pod. These automated pods collected soil samples and atmospheric readings from the planet's surface. They were supposed to be perfectly safe. No human contact required. Commander Wilson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Weather warning, Dr. Reed. Storm approaching your collection area." "Understood, sir. I'll make it quick." James watched from the control room as his pod descended through the purple atmosphere. The readings were normal until suddenly, all his screens flickered. "That's not right," he said, typing commands frantically. The pod's signals became scrambled, then disappeared completely. 3 months of research samples were in that pod. Without them, his whole project could fail. James made a decision that would change everything. "Commander, I need to go down there." "Absolutely not," Wilson replied sharply. "The storm is interfering with our equipment. If I don't get that pod now, we'll lose everything. I'll be in and out in 20 minutes. After 10 minutes of arguing, Wilson finally agreed, but with strict conditions. "You get 1 rescue shuttle. 20 minutes maximum. The second we spot any shadow stalkers, you abort." "Clear." "Crystal clear, sir." The rescue shuttle dropped James in a small clearing. The purple sky had turned almost black with storm clouds, and strange lightning flashed in the distance. He checked his tracker. The pod was only half a mile away. The forest was unlike anything on Earth. Tall trees with blue-tinted bark reached into the sky, their leaves making weird whistling sounds in the wind. James moved carefully, following his tracker's signal. He found the pod stuck in a tangle of vine-like plants. "Got you," he whispered, pulling out his tools. The storm was getting closer, making the trees creak and sway. That's when he heard it, a soft thud behind him. James turned slowly, his heart stopping in his chest. A shadow stalker stood less than 30 feet away. In person, it was both beautiful and terrifying. Its black scales had a slight blue sheen, and its 6 eyes glowed with an inner light. It was bigger than the cameras had shown, easily 9 feet tall when standing straight. All his research told him to run, but something in those eyes made him pause. The creature wasn't charging. It wasn't showing the aggressive behavior from all the reports. Instead, it was watching him. Slowly, very slowly, James raised his empty hands. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The shadow stalker tilted its head, making a clicking sound deep in its throat. It took a step forward, and that's when James noticed something. It was limping. The creature's right leg had a deep wound, poorly healed, and clearly infected. James could see metal fragments embedded in the flesh, probably from one of the station's defense weapons. Without thinking, James reached for his medical kit. The shadow stalker tensed, but still didn't attack. Moving with deliberate slowness, James opened the kit and pulled out his antiseptic spray. "You're hurt," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I can help, if you let me." The creature watched him for what felt like hours. Then, to James's amazement, it slowly sat down, extending its injured leg. With trembling hands, James approached. The shadow stalker could kill him in an instant, but somehow he knew it wouldn't. He sprayed the wound, cleaned out the metal fragments, and applied a healing gel. The whole time, the creature stayed perfectly still, all 6 eyes fixed on him. When he finished, it stood up, tested its leg, and made a purring sound that vibrated through James's chest. "You're welcome," he whispered. Thunder crashed overhead, making them both look up. The storm was almost here. The shadow stalker looked at James one last time, then melted into the forest shadows. James grabbed his pod and ran back to the shuttle, his mind racing. Everything they thought they knew about shadow stalkers was wrong. They weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent, capable of trust, and maybe even gratitude. He couldn't wait to tell everyone back at the station. Then he remembered. No one would believe him. Not without proof. But James had a feeling this wouldn't be his last encounter with the injured shadow stalker. For the next 2 weeks, James found every excuse he could to visit the planet's surface. He told the station crew he needed more samples, more readings, more data. What he didn't tell them was that he had a friend waiting for him. The shadow stalker, whom he now called Ghost because of how silently it moved, always found him. Sometimes James would barely step out of his shuttle before he'd hear that familiar purring sound behind him. "You're getting better at sneaking up on me," James said one morning, setting up his research equipment. Ghost sat nearby, all 6 eyes watching with interest. The wound on its leg had healed cleanly, leaving only a faint scar. James had learned that Ghost understood more than anyone thought possible. When he pointed at things, Ghost looked. When he made hand signals, Ghost responded. They were developing their own simple language. Today, James had brought something new, a portable hologram projector. He set it up and displayed a 3D image of the research station. Ghost's reaction surprised him. Instead of just looking at the hologram, it used its claws to draw something in the dirt. James's heart nearly stopped when he realized what it was. A rough but recognizable map of the surrounding area, showing the forests and caves where the shadow stalkers lived. "You're trying to communicate," James whispered in awe. He took out his tablet and started recording. "You're not just intelligent. You have your own way of sharing information." Ghost made a series of clicking sounds and added more marks to the map. It showed paths through the forest and places marked with special symbols. James realized he was looking at something incredible, the first evidence of shadow stalker culture. But back at the station, people were getting suspicious. Dr. Lisa Green cornered him in the lab one evening. "You've been going to the surface almost every day," she said, crossing her arms. "What are you really doing down there?" "Research," James replied, trying to sound casual. "The shadow stalkers have fascinating behavior patterns." "Behavior patterns?" Lisa's eyes narrowed. "James, please tell me you're not getting close to those things." Those things, James thought, are smarter than we ever imagined. But he couldn't tell her that. Not yet. Instead, he just smiled and changed the subject. The next day, Ghost did something new. Instead of meeting James at the usual spot, it led him deeper into the forest. James knew he should probably be scared, but he trusted Ghost completely now. They came to a cave entrance hidden behind thick vines. Ghost went in first, then turned and waited. It was clearly an invitation. "You want me to come in?" James asked, heart pounding with excitement. Ghost made an encouraging purring sound. Inside, the cave walls glowed with strange blue moss, providing just enough light to see. As they went deeper, James heard more purring sounds. Then he saw them. 3 more shadow stalkers, slightly smaller than Ghost. "Your family," James breathed. Ghost made a proud clicking sound and nudged him forward. The other shadow stalkers approached cautiously. They sniffed at James, examined his clothes, and touched his hair gently with their claws. One of them, probably younger than the others, tried to copy his walking stance. James sat down slowly, trying to show he was comfortable. The younger shadow stalker immediately sat too, mimicking his posture. Soon, all of them were sitting in a circle, studying each other with equal curiosity. If only the others could see this, James thought. He had proof now that shadow stalkers weren't just intelligent. They had families, homes, and the ability to learn and teach. They weren't monsters. They were people. But as Ghost's family accepted him into their circle, James didn't know that his secret was about to be discovered. Back at the station, Commander Wilson was reviewing the shuttle logs, and he had some very serious questions about Dr. Reed's research trips. James knew something was wrong the moment he entered the station's main dock. 3 sleek military ships had arrived overnight, their black hulls marked with the logo of the Interstellar Defense Force. Commander Wilson was waiting for him in the control room, along with a tall woman in a crisp military uniform. Her badge identified her as Captain Rogers of the IDF Special Projects Division. "Dr. Reed," she said with a cold smile, "we've heard interesting things about your research." James felt his stomach tighten. "I'm not sure what you mean, Captain." "Let's not play games." She pulled up video footage on the main screen. It showed James with Ghost and the other shadow stalkers. "Our long-range cameras caught this last week. You've made contact with the target species." "They're not targets," James said quickly. "They're intelligent beings. If you'd just let me explain." "Explain." Captain Rogers laughed. "Dr. Reed, you've done us a great service. You've proven these creatures can be approached. Now we can move forward with the capture operation." James's blood ran cold. Capture operation. The Shadow Stalker's strength and hunting abilities make them perfect candidates for military applications, she explained. "We're here to collect specimens for study. Your friend, the one you've been meeting, will be our first subject." "No." James stepped forward. "You can't do this. Ghost and its family." "Ghost." Rogers raised an eyebrow. "You named it. Dr. Reed, these are not pets. They are weapons waiting to be used. Think of what we could learn from them." Commander Wilson, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Captain, if Dr. Reed's research shows they're intelligent." "They're animals." Rogers cut him off. "Dangerous ones. The mission starts tomorrow at dawn. Dr. Reed, you will provide us with all your data on their territories and behavior patterns." "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll be arrested for violating safety protocols and endangering the station." Rogers' smile disappeared. "Your choice." James spent the next hour pretending to gather his research data. Instead, he was deleting everything. All the maps, all the behavior notes, everything that could help the military find Ghost's family. As soon as night fell, he snuck down to the shuttle bay. The guard was easy to distract with a fake equipment malfunction alarm. Within minutes, James was flying toward the surface. He found Ghost at their usual meeting spot. The Shadow Stalker could tell something was wrong just by looking at him. "They're coming for you," James said urgently. "Tomorrow at dawn. Military ships. Weapons. They want to capture you and your family." Ghost's eyes glowed brighter, and it made a low growling sound James had never heard before. He pulled out his tablet and drew a quick map showing the military's likely approach routes. "You need to hide. All of you. Deep in the caves where their scanners can't reach." But Ghost didn't move. Instead, it drew its own marks on the ground. A battle plan. James realized with a mix of fear and pride that Ghost's people weren't going to run. They were going to fight. "Then let me help," James said. "I know their weapons, their tactics. Together we might have a chance." Ghost touched his shoulder with one gentle claw, then made a sound that James recognized. It meant agreement. They spent the next few hours preparing, using their combined knowledge to set up defenses around the forest. As the purple sun began to rise, James heard the military ships approaching. He looked at Ghost, standing proud and fierce beside him. "Whatever happens," he said, "I want you to know that meeting you changed everything I thought I knew about life in this galaxy." Ghost made the purring sound that James had come to love. Then both of them turned to face the coming battle. The military wanted to see what Shadow Stalkers could do. They were about to find out, but not in the way they expected. Dawn broke over the forest as 3 military shuttles descended through the purple clouds. James and Ghost watched from their hiding spot among the blue bark trees. Behind them, 20 Shadow Stalkers waited silently in the shadows. "Remember," James whispered, "we just need to show them the truth. No killing if we can avoid it." Ghost made a soft clicking sound of agreement. During their night of preparation, James had learned more about shadow stalker culture than in all his previous research. They weren't just intelligent, they were civilized. The first military team landed in the clearing. 6 soldiers in heavy armor, carrying stun weapons and capture nets. Captain Rogers stepped out last, holding a scanner. "Spread out," she ordered. "Find the big one Dr. Reed's been meeting. We need it alive." James watched as Ghost signaled to its pack with subtle movements of its claws. The shadow stalkers began to move through the trees, silent as smoke, surrounding the soldiers. Then Ghost did something that changed everything. It stepped into the clearing, alone and unthreatening. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Ghost simply sat down and began to draw in the dirt. "Hold fire," James shouted, running out to join his friend. "Everyone, just watch." The soldiers kept their weapons up, but their eyes widened as Ghost's claws moved across the ground. In the dirt, Ghost drew the history of its people. The pictures showed shadow stalkers living peacefully until the first human ships arrived. They showed humans attacking without warning, destroying nests, trying to capture young ones. The shadow stalkers had only fought back to protect their families. "This is ridiculous," Captain Rogers said, but her voice wavered. "They're animals. They can't." Ghost wasn't finished. It drew more. Underground cities beneath the forest, schools where young shadow stalkers learned hunting and art, families caring for each other. Last, it drew James helping with the leg injury, and then teaching and learning together. "They're not animals," James said quietly. "They're people. Different from us, but people. All the deaths, all the violence. It happened because we attacked them first. They were just defending their homes." As if to prove his point, the rest of Ghost's pack emerged from the trees. But they didn't attack. Instead, each one sat down and began to draw their own stories in the dirt. One showed how it had lost its mate to human hunters. Another drew pictures of their young ones hiding in fear every time ships flew overhead. A third drew their ancient traditions, passed down through generations. The soldiers lowered their weapons, looking at each other in confusion. Even Captain Rogers seemed speechless as she walked among the drawings. "If what you're saying is true," she finally said, "then we've made a terrible mistake." "We can fix it," James replied. "But first, you have to cancel the capture mission. These beings deserve their freedom and respect." Ghost stood and walked to Captain Rogers. Slowly, carefully, it reached out and touched the insignia on her uniform, then drew the same symbol in the dirt, adding marks around it that James recognized as the shadow stalker signs for peace and understanding. "They want to make peace," James explained. "They're willing to forget the past if we are. We could learn so much from each other, but as equals, not as captors and specimens." Rogers looked at the drawings again, then at her soldiers, who were now watching the shadow stalkers with wonder instead of fear. Finally, she pulled out her communicator. "Command, this is Captain Rogers. I'm canceling the capture operation. The situation here is not what we thought. Requesting diplomatic personnel instead. We've made first contact with an intelligent species." Ghost made a happy purring sound and put one clawed hand on James's shoulder. Around them, shadow stalkers and humans began to mingle cautiously, curiosity replacing fear on both sides. "We did it," James said softly to his friend. But he knew this was just the beginning. The real work of building trust between their species was about to start. Peace lasted exactly 3 days. Then the main IDF battleship arrived. "They're not accepting my orders to stand down," Captain Rogers said, pacing in the station's control room. "General Parker is coming himself. He wants the shadow stalkers, no matter what." James watched the massive ship descend through the atmosphere on the monitor screens. Ghost stood beside him, all 6 eyes focused on the approaching threat. In the past few days, the station crew had gotten used to having a shadow stalker on board. "How many soldiers?" James asked. "At least 50, Rogers replied. "With heavy weapons and neural restraints. They're not planning to ask nicely this time. Commander Wilson joined them at the screens. We have to evacuate the shadow stalkers. Get them deep underground where? No, Ghost interrupted, using the simple word symbols it had learned to draw. Everyone stared as it drew a different plan on the screen surface. It wasn't a retreat. It was a defense strategy. James translated the marks. Ghost says this is their home. They won't be driven from it. Not again. He looked at his friend. But you'll be outnumbered. Ghost made a clicking sound that James had learned meant laughter. It drew more symbols, showing paths through the forest that only shadow stalkers knew, places where the ground wasn't as solid as it looked, and hidden caves that could become perfect traps. They've been preparing for something like this for generations, James realized. Every time humans attacked, they learned and adapted. Captain Rogers studied the plan. This could work. But we'd need perfect coordination between humans and shadow stalkers. Then it's good thing we have both, James said. They spent the next hour preparing. Ghost's pack spread through the forest, while James, Rogers, and a few loyal soldiers set up positions around the landing zone. Commander Wilson stayed on the station, ready to help from above. The battleship landed with a roar that shook the trees. General Parker stepped out first, a tall man with cold eyes and a face that hadn't smiled in years. Captain Rogers, he barked, you and your team are relieved. We'll handle this operation properly. Sir, Rogers stepped forward. You don't understand. The shadow stalkers are intelligent beings. We can't. I understand perfectly. Parker cut her off. I understand that you've all gone soft. These creatures killed our people. They're valuable weapons, nothing more. He turned to his soldiers. Move out. Full capture protocols. The soldiers spread into the forest, weapons ready. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. Then the forest came alive. Shadow stalkers appeared and disappeared like ghosts, leading soldiers into soft ground that swallowed their legs. Others used their natural clicking sounds to confuse the troops, making them shoot at shadows and empty air. It was a perfect demonstration of intelligence over brute force. Stop this, Parker shouted, firing his weapon wildly. Show yourselves and fight. Ghost dropped from a tree right in front of him. But instead of attacking, it drew a line in the dirt between them. Then it wrote in clear human letters, words it had been practicing with James. No memory fighting. Parker raised his gun. James ran forward, putting himself between them. General, look around you. All through the forest, shadow stalkers were disarming soldiers without hurting them. Some soldiers had already put down their weapons, realizing what they were really facing. These weren't mindless beasts. They were warriors choosing not to kill. This is your legacy, General, James said. You can be the man who started a war, or the one who made first peaceful contact with an incredible species. Your choice. Parker looked at his trapped soldiers, at the shadow stalkers showing mercy, at Ghost standing proud but peaceful. Slowly, his gun lowered. Maybe, he said quietly. We have a lot to learn. Ghost made a happy purring sound and drew a new symbol, one that meant beginning. James smiled, knowing that finally, after all the fear and fighting, a true understanding between humans and shadow stalkers could start. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in the forest. The research station Horizon had grown twice its original size, but it wasn't just a human facility anymore. Shadow stalkers moved freely through its corridors, working alongside humans in a partnership that had amazed the entire galaxy. James stood at his favorite observation window, watching the purple sunset. Ghost appeared silently beside him, as it often did, but now it wore a specially designed translator collar that turned its clicks and purrs into words. The council members have arrived, Ghost's translator said. They seem nervous. James smiled. Well, it's not every day the Galactic Council has to officially recognize a species they once labeled as monsters. Today was historic. The formal recognition of shadow stalkers as a sentient species with full rights under galactic law. The station's main hall had been prepared for the ceremony, with both human and shadow stalker art decorating the walls. "Remember when you first treated my leg?" Ghost asked. "I thought you were either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," James laughed. "But look what came from it." They walked together to the main hall. The changes of the past months were everywhere. Humans and shadow stalkers worked together in the labs, combining their knowledge. Young shadow stalkers learned to write in human languages, while human children learned the complex clicking speech of their new friends. The hall was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. Captain Rogers, now Admiral Rogers, stood with Commander Wilson near the front. Even General Parker was there, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined to show his support. The head of the Galactic Council, a tall being from the Centauri system, stepped forward to speak. 6 months ago, we received reports that humans had made peaceful contact with what we thought were the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Today, we correct that mistake." Ghost stepped onto the stage, its black scales gleaming under the lights. 24 other shadow stalkers followed, each representing a different clan. "The shadow stalkers," the council had continued, "have proven themselves to be not just intelligent, but highly advanced. Their understanding of forest ecosystems, their sustainable cities, their art and culture, all of these show a civilization that developed differently from ours, but is no less remarkable." James watched proudly as Ghost began to draw on a large screen, showing the council members the history and achievements of its people. The drawings were no longer just simple marks in dirt. They had evolved into a complex language that combined art and mathematics. Furthermore, the council had announced, in recognition of the unique bond between humans and shadow stalkers, we are establishing a joint embassy. "Dr. James Reed, please step forward." James walked to the stage, surprised. Ghost made a happy purring sound that the translator didn't need to interpret. "Dr. Reed, your bravery in reaching out to the shadow stalkers and your dedication to understanding them has opened a new chapter in galactic history. Will you accept the position as the first joint ambassador?" James looked at Ghost, who nodded encouragingly. "I would be honored, but only if Ghost will serve as co-ambassador." "That was always the plan," Ghost's translator said, causing laughter throughout the hall. As the ceremony continued, James thought about how far they'd come. The feared predators of Planet 2187 were now teachers, sharing their knowledge of ecology and sustainable living. Human medical technology was helping shadow stalkers live longer, healthier lives. Both species had grown stronger together. "What are you thinking?" Ghost asked later, as they watched ships arrive from other worlds, carrying more people eager to learn from this historic partnership. "I'm thinking," James replied, "that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't a predator or a weapon. Sometimes it's just our fear of what we don't understand." Ghost made the clicking sound of agreement. Above them, the purple sun set on one chapter of history and rose on another, brighter one, where the galaxy's most lethal predator had become humanity's greatest friend.